A secret American peace plan, a Kremlin warning that Zelensky is running out of time, and Europe bracing for a deal that could reshape the war. Washington's 28-point proposal is now out in the open, a plan Ukraine didn't negotiate, Russia says it's ready for, and the world is watching. The stakes are brutal. Accept a peace written by others, or risk losing even more before talks begin. As Donald Trump's push for a Ukraine peace deal gains momentum, his secretly drafted 28-point proposal is now triggering reactions across world capitals. While Washington has already handed the plan to Kyiv, the Kremlin says it has received nothing official from the United States, but insists it is ready to negotiate. On November 21st, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Moscow and Washington were not yet discussing the proposal in detail, but confirmed that contacts were ongoing. He suggested the Ukrainian leadership must make what he called a responsible decision.
The effective work of the Russian armed forces should convince Zelensky and his regime that it is better to negotiate and do so now. It's better to do this right now rather than later. His room for decision-making is shrinking as he loses territory during the offensive actions of the Russian armed forces. It is not about the war, it is about forcing Zelensky and his regime to a peaceful settlement. Continuing the war is pointless and dangerous for them. The Ukrainian regime must make a responsible decision. Do it now and assume responsibility.
Peskov added that Russia wanted the negotiations to be successful. On Trump's 28-point peace plan, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, on November 21st, said that Ukraine was going through one of the difficult phases, but affirmed that it will not give Russia a reason to say that Ukraine does not want peace.
Now is one of the most difficult moments in our history. Now the pressure on Ukraine is one of the most difficult. Now Ukraine may find itself facing a very difficult choice, either the loss of dignity or the risk of losing a key partner. Either the difficult 28 points or an extremely difficult winter, the most difficult, and further risks. The national Ukrainian interest must be taken into account. We are not making loud statements. We will calmly work with America and all partners. There will be a constructive search for solutions with our main partner. I will present arguments, I will convince, and offer alternatives. But we will definitely not give the enemy a reason to say that Ukraine does not want peace, that it is she who is disrupting the process, and that Ukraine is not ready for diplomacy.
European leaders cautiously welcomed Washington's initiative. Germany's Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul said the plan should be seen as a set of urgent discussion points rather than a final roadmap.
I still consider it to be a list of issues that urgently need to be discussed between Ukraine and Russia, not a final plan. I welcome once again the fact that the United States of America is also attempting to bring both parties to the table. The German position is the European position, and that means we are backing Ukraine. We want to ensure that Ukraine can discuss these points from a position of strength, and it will be Ukraine that has to decide what compromises to make, just as Russia has to make such decisions on its part. We are not arbitrators here, but we are Ukraine's advocates because Ukraine is defending its own freedom and the freedom of Europe.
The European Union echoed that stance, saying any peace initiative must secure a just and lasting peace and include Ukraine and Europe directly.
We are supportive of any plan that brings about just and lasting peace. As for the peace plan we understand that President Zelensky has been presented with, we have always said that any peace plan to work, it has to be with Ukraine and with the Europeans on board.
Donald Trump's plan for ending the war in Ukraine outlines a specific commitment from Ukraine, Russia, Europe, and the United States. As per the plan, Ukraine's sovereignty will be formally confirmed. Russia, Ukraine, and Europe would sign a comprehensive non-aggression pact. Russia commits not to invade neighboring countries. NATO, in turn, agrees not to expand further. A new US-mediated dialogue between Russia and NATO would address all outstanding security issues. Ukraine would receive reliable security guarantees. Its armed forces would be limited to 600,000 personnel. Ukraine would not join NATO. NATO would pledge that Ukraine will not be admitted in the future. NATO would also agree not to station troops on Ukrainian territory. European fighter jets would instead be based in Poland. The plan further outlines that the US security guarantee comes with strict conditions. Washington receives compensation for providing the guarantee. If Ukraine invades Russia, the guarantee is revoked. If Russia invades Ukraine, all global sanctions snap back immediately, and any recognition or benefits granted under this deal are cancelled. If Ukraine launches a missile at Moscow or St. Petersburg, the US guarantee becomes invalid. As per the plan, Ukraine remains eligible for EU membership. A major international program would be launched to rebuild Ukraine. Trump's plan says that Russia would be reintegrated into the global economy, and frozen Russian assets would be used to help reconstruct Ukraine. It also suggests that a joint US-Russia security working group would be created, and Russia would legally commit to non-aggression toward both Europe and Ukraine. The US and Russia would extend existing nuclear treaties as per the peace plan, and Ukraine reaffirms its non-nuclear status. Further, electricity from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant would be shared equally between Russia and Ukraine. Both countries agree to promote cultural tolerance through educational programs. The territorial questions are laid out explicitly in the peace plan. Crimea, Luhansk and Donetsk would be recognized as de facto Russian, including by the United States. Kherson and Zaporizhzhia would be frozen along the current line of contact. Russia would withdraw from other territories it controls outside the 5 disputed regions. Ukrainian forces would pull back from the remaining part of Donetsk Oblast. Any violation of these territorial commitments would void all security guarantees. The plan further mentions that Russia would allow Ukraine full commercial use of the Dnipro River, and a humanitarian committee would be created to resolve unresolved issues. The peace plan also highlights that Ukraine would hold national elections within 100 days. All parties involved in the conflict would receive full amnesty. The agreement would be legally binding and overseen by a new peace council, chaired by US President Donald Trump. And once all parties sign this memorandum, an immediate ceasefire would take effect.